Good morning, Nigeria. Welcome to today's newspaper review. Let's take a look at the stories dominating today's newspaper headline. Firstly, we'll start from the Punch newspaper. On the Punch newspaper in page 2, Mark slams federal government after appeal court reverses ADC deregistration. Mark slams federal government after appeal court reverses ADC deregistration. At the top of the newspaper, NDC to bind Obi Kwankwaso with anti-defection oath. The NDC wants to bind Obi and Kwankwaso with anti-defection oath. To get that story, go to page 12 of the Punch newspaper. At the bottom of the newspaper, 150 terrorists convicted in 48 hours, says AGF. That 150 terrorists convicted in 48 hours. To get that story, go to page 10 of the Punch newspaper. Away from that newspaper to the Daily Sun. On the Daily Sun, in page 6, Senate to probe Oshimole's allegation against Akpabio. This is an alleged signatures forgery. The Senate to probe Oshimole's allegations against Akpabio. To get that story, go to page 6 of the Daily Sun newspaper. At the top of the newspaper, Appeal Court halts the registration of ADC orders. Appeal courts have held on to the registration of ADC and other parties. To get that story, go to page 26 and 27 of the Daily Sun newspaper. Still in the same newspaper, federal government moves to tighten security at borders as gunmen attacks NIPPS. The federal government has taken a move to tighten security at borders as gunmen attack NIPPS. To get that story, go to page 4 and 6 of the newspaper. Obi's party, NDC, moved to forestall defections. Obi's party, NDC, moved to forestall defections. To get that story, go to page 28 of the newspaper. Still in the same newspaper, at the bottom, on Oyo school adoption, protest rocks Ibadan as VDM leads bring them back action. To get that story, you go to page 27 of the newspaper. Away from that newspaper to the New Telegraph. On the New Telegraph, in page 3, 5, 6, and 27, which is boldly written, Justice Lifu's action, an affront to court hierarchy, says appeal court. The appeal court are saying Justice Lifu's action, an affront to court hierarchy. At the top of the newspaper, Mid-East crisis. Nigerians captures European jets A1 market with $1.8 billion exports. To get that story, you go to page 3 of the newspaper. Still in the same newspaper, IMF highlights rise of stable coin use in Nigeria. That the International Monetary Fund highlights rise of stable coin use in Nigeria. To get that story, go to page 8 of the newspaper. At the bottom of the newspaper, on insecurity, porous borders fueling terrorism arms trafficking, says Ribadu. This is on insecurity from Ribadu, saying that porous borders fueling terrorism arms trafficking. To get that story, go to page 2, 4, and 5 of the newspaper. Still on Oyo school adoption. I will risk my life to bring back school children, says Makinde. This is coming from Governor of Oyo State. Governor Makinde says that he will risk his life to bring back school children. I hope that he brings them back home safely. To get that story, you go to page 2, 4, 5, 6, and 7 of the newspaper. Away from that newspaper to the Guardian. On the Guardian in page 6, digital adoption leaves 300 local governments stranded, dependent on POS agents. Digital adoption leaves 300 local governments stranded, dependent on POS agents. At the top of the newspaper, I am ready to risk my life for release of Oriri adoptees. Makinde vows. Still on school adoption. Governor Makinde is vowing that he's ready to risk his life to make sure that they release the Oriri adoptees. To get that story, go to page 3 of the newspaper. Still in the same newspaper, petrol remains 1,350 naira per litre in Abuja amid crashing oil prices. Dangote effects 75% cuts. Petrol remains 1,350 naira per litre in Abuja amid crashing oil prices. Dangote effects 75% cut. To read that story, go to page 3 of the Guardian newspaper. Still in the same newspaper, Atiku, Mark, lead opposition pushback as appeal court has party deregistration. To read that story, go to page 6 of the Guardian newspaper. Away from that newspaper to the Daily Monitor. On the Daily Monitor, which is boldly written there, appeal court suspends execution of judgment. Order to deregister ADC and 4 other parties. Appeal court suspend execution of judgment. At the top of the newspaper, Abuja mass trial. Federal government secures 150 conviction of terrorists on first day. How will they convict terrorists? So the federal government has secured 150 conviction of terrorists on first day. Still in the same newspaper, Nasarawa, 12 soldiers face court-martial over alleged murder, criminal offences. This is coming from Nasarawa State. 12 soldiers face court-martial over alleged murder, criminal offences. To read that story, go to page 8 of the Daily Monitor newspaper. Still in the same newspaper, on insecurity, Katsina shuts POS, bans jerrycan fuel, motorcycles. Katsina has shut POS and they have banned jerrycan fuel and motorcycles. To read that story, you go to page 8 of the Daily Monitor newspaper. At the bottom of the newspaper, porous borders fueling terrorism, other crimes, NSA warns. Porous borders fueling terrorism, other crimes, NSA warns. Away from that newspaper to the Daily Trust. On the Daily Trust, which is boldly written there, how gunmen attacked NIPSS. How gunmen attack NIPSS. To read more on that, you go to page 4 of the newspaper. At the top of the newspaper, despite reforms, Naira remains weak. This is coming from the International Monetary Funds. They are saying that despite reforms, Naira remains weak. To read more on that story, you go to page 6 of the newspaper. Still in the same newspaper, Sultan Catholic bishops demands action against insecurity. The Sultan Catholic bishops are demanding action against the insecurity happening in our country, Nigeria. To read more on that story, go to page 8 of the newspaper. At the bottom of the newspaper on page 5, appeal court suspend Justice Lifo's judgment deregistering ADC and others. Away from that newspaper to the Nigerian Tribune. On the Nigerian Tribune on page 2, appeal court has execution of judgment deregistering ADC, Accord, and 3 other parties. At the top of the newspaper, Oyo, not Chibok. We will rescue adopted people's teachers. Oyo, not Chibok. We will rescue adopted people's teachers, says Makinde. This is coming from the governor of Oyo State. Governor Makinde says that this is an Oyo, not Chibok attack, that he will rescue adopted pupils and teachers. We hope that he keeps to his words. To read more on that story, go to page 13 of the Nigerian Tribune. At the bottom of the newspaper, terrorism. We have recorded 150 convictions in 2 days, says federal government. This is on terrorism, and the federal government is saying that they have recorded 150 convictions in 2 days. How can they convict terrorists? To read more on that story, you go to page 26 of the Nigerian Tribune newspaper. Away from that newspaper to the Matrix. On the Matrix, which is boldly written on page 2. 2027, appeal court stops the registration of ADC, Accord, and other political parties. The appeal court has stopped the registration of ADC, Accord, and other political parties. At the top of the newspaper, custom bust 12.8 8 billion naira smuggling ring seizes 1.8 tons of Canadian loud expired drugs at Apapa port. This is coming from the custom. Custom has seized 12.8 billion smuggling ring, and they have also seized 1.8 tons of Canadian loud expired drugs at Apapa airport. To read more on that story, you go to page 8 of the matrix. At the bottom of the newspaper, FG hails digital switch over breakthrough set for launch today. Federal government have hailed digital switch over breakthrough set for launch today. To read more on that story, go to page 2 of the newspaper. On entertainment, Brimo urges Wizkid, Davido, Burna Boy to make way for new stars. This is coming from Brimo. He has urged Wizkid, Davido, Burna Boy to make way for new stars, like the new coming stars in music industry. To read more on that story, you go to page 23. On sports, Mbappe breaks France scoring record as Les Bleus defeat Senegal. Mbappe breaks France scoring record as Les Bleus defeat Senegal. To read more on that on sports, you go to page 25 of the Matrix newspaper. And that's all for today's newspaper review. Thank you for watching and stay tuned for more updates. I'm Chidera Esom. Do have a beautiful day.